After clicking the Validate button on the project sheet, you will notice that the DVM has added a number of additional worksheet tabs along the bottom of your screen. When the Resi Overview tab is opened, we see a worksheet like this. This page is where I define the dwelling types in my proposed development, their size, their value, and the mix of dwelling types in the scheme, including the number of affordable homes that will be provided and their tenure. I can either populate this worksheet with my own dwelling types, working from left to right across the columns on each row, or I can use the schedule of standard dwelling types on the worksheet that is accessed via the SDT tab at the bottom of your screen. I can also add my own dwelling types to those already on the SDT sheet by adding them in the yellow section from rows 25 to 54. How you do that is explained in the help notes behind the button at the top right-hand corner of the SDT sheet. How you choose to populate the Resi Overview sheet will partly depend on the size and complexity of your development project. For a development of 10 units or less, and with non-standard dwelling types, it might be more convenient to enter those dwelling types directly into the Resi Overview sheet, as I have started to do in this next screenshot. I have completed the first line, and I now need to click the Add New Row button to add another house type. The help notes on the Resi Overview page explain how to do this. Note that the counter on a green background at the top left-hand corner of the page has accounted for the 10 dwellings I have included in my schedule so far, and so tells me that I still have 110 dwellings to specify. Here I have added a second row and specified social rented tenure in column H. The DVM has calculated the transfer value of those units in column J, based on the ACG tables that you can view from the ACG Worksheet tab at the bottom of your screen. Note that the counter at the top left has taken account of the 4 further units on row 8 of my table, and is also telling me that those 4 affordable units represent 3.3% of the 120 dwellings in my development project. Instead of continuing with this though, I'm going to use standard dwelling types to populate the Resi Overview for my development. I do this by selecting Yes from the drop-down menu in column B for each of the dwelling types I want to include. I don't have to select No for those I don't want to include, I just leave a blank in column B. By then clicking the Populate button at the top of the page, the selected dwelling types are copied to the Resi Overview sheet. All I then have to do is complete the blank columns, and the DVM does the rest. Enter the number of units against each dwelling type in column A, then select the proposed tenure from the drop-down list in column H. The choice is between open market dwellings for sale and 2 affordable tenure types, social rented or intermediate. If some of your dwelling types will be partly for open market sale and partly affordable homes, start by defining them as open market units. If I select OM, standing for open market, in column H, my cursor moves automatically to column J, where I must provide a market value for that dwelling type. The DVM automatically calculates what that value represents in pounds per square metre, and also provides a total value for that house type in column L. It is usually easiest to leave the element number in column G blank until you have completed your schedule of development types, as I have done in this next screenshot. So far, I have accounted for all 120 dwellings as open market units, but the LDP policy tells me that it ought to be viable for my development to deliver 20% of those dwellings as affordable homes. I've highlighted the two dwelling types I will use for that purpose with a green arrow. I can achieve the affordable housing requirement of 24 units by classifying 12 of each of those dwelling types with an affordable tenure. I do this by firstly placing my cursor on row 9 and then clicking the Copy Selected Row button at the top of the screen. In this screenshot, you can see that the contents of row 9 have been duplicated on a new row 10, which the DVM has inserted for me. Not surprisingly, I have 24 too many dwellings in my scheme, so I must change the entries in A9 and A10 to 12 to correct this. This screenshot shows what the schedule looks like when I've done this, and by changing the tenure to intermediate in H10, the DVM has automatically imported the appropriate transfer value from the ACG tables into J10. At the top left-hand corner of the page, you'll see too that the proportion of affordable homes in the development is now 10%. In this next screenshot, I've repeated that process to turn 12 of my 3-bedroom, 5-person house types into social rented units, which achieves the 20% affordable housing target in the LDP. Once again, the DVM has drawn the appropriate transfer value from the ACG tables into my Resi Overview schedule at J13. I now have to decide whether or not to break my development down into more than one element, because it includes a small block of flats in which there will be some circulation space that adds no value to the scheme, but which will add to my build costs. I decide to treat the houses as one element and the flats as a second element. That will also allow me to apply one build cost rate per square metre to the flats and a different rate to the houses. So this screenshot shows that I've ascribed all the houses to element number 1 in column G and the flats to a second element, number 2. Incidentally, if I decide that I want to remove a row from the Resi Overview schedule, I can do that by very simply selecting the row in question and clicking the Delete Selected Row button at the top of the page. Similarly, if I wanted to add a completely new row with a different dwelling type, I would click the Add New Row button and a new blank row will appear beneath the bottom row of the existing table. When I click the Add Subtotals button, the DVM shows me a breakdown of my housing mix by element, tenure and dwelling type. I can see that there are 80 open market homes in my first element and a 50-50 split between the two types of affordable homes in the same element, which then contains a total of 104 dwellings. Totals for the whole development appear on row 22. To remove this breakdown, I click the Remove Subtotals button, thus, and my schedule of dwelling types has been reordered by element number and by tenure. After a final check that this shows me the scheme I want to build, I save the file, once again as a macro-enabled workbook, and I'm ready to create the two Resi elements by clicking that button at the top right-hand corner of the page. Because my development involves more than one element, the DVM has offered me the opportunity to access a Development Planner worksheet that will enable me to visualize the relative timescales for each element in my overall project. You can read more about that in the user guide. And for more complex developments than this one, perhaps involving several phases, it can be a useful means of planning when each phase or element might start and finish. For the purposes of this demonstration, though, I'm going to select No in the dialog box. My screen then looks like this, and you can see at the bottom of the page that two extra worksheet tabs have been inserted for my two Resi elements. The Create Resi Elements button at the top of the page has changed to Update. This is because the DVM allows me to come back and change the dwelling mix on my Resi Overview page at any time. But if I do so, I must use this button to update the Resi element sheets and then review the contents of those element sheets in order to update the cash flow worksheet and the outputs to my appraisal. Thirdly, we clear the dialog box by clicking OK, and we're ready to complete the Resi element worksheets with the next screencast video.